Hi, I'm Kelvin, guest of Guest Wines, and welcome to our Wine and Dine with Collins Fine Food. Collins Fine Food have prepared 3 delicious dishes for you, and we have selected 3 marvellous wines that we think work a treat, not only by themselves, but with the dishes before you. But before we go any further, can I check that we have the following wines with us? We have the Hunter's Mirror Mirror from New Zealand, the Chevalier Crow's Hermitage from France, and from Chile, we have the Casa Silva Late Harvest Semillon Gewürz Traminer. Thank you. Brilliant. Well done. Absolutely brilliant. Right, these are being selected to go with these wonderful dishes from Collins Fine Food. And these are the double baked cheese and chive pudding with Parmesan cream, the fillet of beef with gratin of wild mushrooms, fond potato squash and grain mustard, or vegetarian option, which is the chestnut and mushroom lentil Wellington. And finally, for puds, we've got the passion fruit parfait. All sounds very, very, very nice to me. I can't wait. I can't wait to try these wines, and I'm sure that these foods are absolutely going to be wonderful for you guys as well this evening. So, right. So, without further ado, before we just go and dig into these foods and get into all this wine, let's just take it a step back and do a little bit of wine tasting, and then talk a little bit about food and wine matching, and then I'll talk about the wines and then why they will go with the dishes. Now, I'm sure you're all excellent at wine drinking. Wine drinking is you just grab a glass, you fill it up, you drink, job's done, the world is right. With wine tasting, it's just about taking a step back and paying a little bit more attention and focusing on what it actually is you're experiencing in the glass, and then being able to describe what your experience is and convey that to someone else, so they understand what it is that you're actually saying, and they can either agree or disagree on what you are saying. But it's all just really about communicating something that you are experiencing, and hopefully it will be a positive experience that you're experiencing from the wine in the glass. Now, we use an approach, it's called a systematic approach to tasting, and what this is it's used in professional environments, as well as when we're just having a bit of fun at an informal, friendly wine tasting, or a wine and dine such as this one we're doing here. And this approach is basically what you're doing is you're looking at the wine, you're smelling the wine, you're tasting it, and you're making a conclusion. And the conclusion that we really want to get to is, do we like this wine? Would we want another glass of it? Because that's where the wine is doing its job. It doesn't matter if a wine is inexpensive. It doesn't even matter if a wine is not always perfectly made. What matters is if that wine will make you want to pour another glass of it, because that is a good wine. Not necessarily an expensive wine or a perfectly well-made wine. It's a wine that you want another glass of. So we've got 3 wines in front of us this evening, 3 very different ones. We've got a fizz, we've got a red, and we've got a dessert wine. So there's lots and lots of things here to pull out and enjoy, and also have different experiences from. So with the first one, I'm going to start off and do the sparkling wine, and we can all have a go at this if you want. And I'm just going to show you first now how to taste the wine through the systematic approach. And this is going to be looking at the wine, smelling the wine, and then tasting the wine. Now, to open a bottle of fizz, and I'm hoping this is not going to go everywhere, if you want to be if you're a Formula One driver, the best way to open a bottle of fizz is to shake it up, pull out the top of it, and then just let it spray everywhere else. However, if you're intending to actually drink the actual fizz in the bottle, it's not really a good idea to do that. So you want the bottle, you want to keep it nice and well chilled, excuse me, about 9 to 10 degrees. So that's about an hour or so in the fridge, let it chill down. You want it to have settled, so it's not being jerked around everywhere, so that there's that time to just be sort of mellow in the bottle already, because it's under a lot of pressure in here anyway, about 5 to 6 bars of pressure. So you really don't want the wine to be going everywhere other than in a glass and in your mouth, really. So what you do is you loosen the cage, you take the foil off, you loosen the cage, but keep the cage on, and then you hold this firmly with your hand, and it's the bottom of the bottle that you start to twist, and not the top. And what you're doing is, as you go, you can feel the cork starts to ease out, but you keep a firm grip on it and just let it come out very slowly. And if you can hear, look, just a slight ease coming out of air. There, fantastic. And if it does start to pour out with the fizz, just keep it at an angle. If you keep it upright, it'll just keep pouring out, and you'll lose most of your wine. And then you've got all the nasty cleaning up to do. So you just keep it at an angle. So that come out there. And the technical term from that, there's a term for it. If you want to know about it, it's called the angel's fart. Okay, so you come out nice little, just a little sigh as it came out. So I'm going to use a flute. You don't have to. You can use an ordinary wine glass. Why use a flute? It just enables it just to capture those bubbles in there. It makes it look attractive, and it keeps the flavours in, and they come direct up to your nose. Now to pour it, just pour it out nice and steady, because now with this you've got the added fizz that's in there. Now I'm pouring a tasting measure. Now a tasting measure is about a third in the glass, and that's all, because I'm going to do a bit of swirling and sniffing. And if I pour it right to the top, which is totally fine in a glass like this, it's just that I won't be able to get as much air in there to allow it to interact with the wine, to enable the aromas to come out, so I can enjoy them and begin to identify what they are as part of a tasting. So in here I've got a little bit of wine, about a third. Now with a sparkling wine, there is the fizz that comes to it. This is that's the CO2 gas that's been captured inside the bottle, which we'll come on to in a little while. And these make the bubbles. Now the geeky term for bubbles are called beads, and the froth on top is referred to as the mousse. So we can come and talk about those a little bit in a little while on the sparkling wine itself, but I'm just going to show you how to taste the wine just now. So we're going to look at it, we're going to smell it, then I'm going to taste it, and then we're going to make a conclusion. So the first part that we're going to be looking at is to look at the wine. You're looking at what you're looking at here. You're looking at clarity. You don't want anything floating in it. You don't want it to be cloudy. Now there is some wines that are purposely made to be cloudy. These come under the natural wines banner, and they are made that way. And often will state that's what has been done. But in the majority of wines that we buy, they're not made that way. They're made to be clear. They're either filtered or they're left to settle, so that any sediment that's in the tank is then taken away. So you get this lovely clarity in the glass. And this one's got a nice golden colour to it. It's very inviting. It looks very clean. The bubbles are nice. They're going nice up the glass. They're not too aggressive. They're nice and small, which you would expect them to be. So it looks sort of delicate and fresh. So this is all way sort of set it that this wine looks clear, it looks nice. Okay, another way to do it, another tip, is you could get some sort of white background. I've got some paper, you can do a white background, you can put it on the white there or a napkin, and you can look at the colour. Generally what you're looking at in a white wine, you're looking at the dense part of the glass. So this is kind of the middle bit where it's the most dense in the liquid, and that gives you an indication of what the colour will be. Now, generally speaking, a white wine, the younger it is, the lighter it tends to be. And as it ages, if it is a wine that is meant to age, it will start to get darker in colour until eventually it'll end up like a browny colour, and then it's not really what you want to be drinking. With a red wine, they usually start off the opposite way, where they start very dark in colour. It could be a purple or a dark ruby, very bright, very sort of, really sort of lots of colour in there. And as they age, that colour falls out and they end up like a bricky brown colour, and then they'll just be not as nice to taste. But some of them, when they do turn bricky brown and have a bit of age and they're meant to age, they take on new and interesting flavours, which is that can be very interesting. And a lot of people do like older wines that have done that. So with this fizz is not one that's really meant for aging. It's something that's to be enjoyed young and fresh and simple. So this is what we've got here. So it's looking nice. It's looking nice and clear. It's got some nice bubbles, some nice, what we say is beads. The mousse is just delicate on top of it. So the next bit is we're going to stick a nose in. Now with sparkling wine, you don't really want to whoosh it around too much, because you'll lose all that lovely fizz that's going on in there. But you do want to just give it just a little swirl, and that allows it to interact with the oxygen. The oxygen then starts to open the wine up. It interacts with the wine and it starts releasing some of these aroma particles. And in there, just give it a little sniff. And in here, what we can start to smell now is these nice citrus fruits. And I always think of things like lemon curd, and then I go on to some more of the fruits, maybe a little bit of apple, green, maybe a bit of red apple going on in there. And then there could be even something riper, a little bit of yellow pear, something tropical coming on in there. But mainly, it's got this nice apple lemon strudel essence to it. And then a slight herbaceous, maybe something a bit savoury, biscuity pastry about it. And that's because of how this wine's been made. And again, I can explain that in a little while. So it smells nice. It doesn't smell out of condition. I don't sort of smell it and go, oh, that smells nice. You know, one of the biggest faults that you can find in a wine, one of the wines where you might not like one, is if a wine's corked. And when we talk about it being corked, we're not talking about just bits of cork floating in there. You've opened a bottle and then it's cork floating in. If that happens, just get a tea strainer or something like that and put the wine through, and then your problem solved. When we talk about corked wine, it's an actual bacteria that's on the cork, and when it's mixed with certain chemicals in the winery, it forms a new compound, and it smells like, I suppose it's like damp cardboard. It can smell a bit sort of fusty, musty kind of smell, and we can, as humans, we can detect it parts per million. And sometimes it can be just a faint waft in a wine, and other times it could just be full-on musty moldiness, and it's just not nice. It won't harm you if you drink it, and if you are really desperate that you want the glass of wine, then it's not going to do anything to you physically, but emotionally it might shatter you because it doesn't taste very nice and it's not that pleasant to taste at all. So that's one of the main faults that you will find. There is other faults that you can get in wine. Sometimes with the fermentation, things can go wrong with like lack of oxygen at the right time, or yeasts not giving off certain compounds connected with sulfur, and then they can just get a bit smelly, a bit block draining and things like that. So these are things that you just do not want in a wine. This one doesn't have that. It smells nice. But even though it might not have any faults, it might not be to your liking. It might not be that your preference is, because we've all got our own preferences of what we like and what we don't like. You know, like as much as we're all genetically different, so we'll all smell and taste things slightly different from other people, and be things that are more intense to us and some things less intense. It's just the same with our preferences. Some of this is down to experience, the things that we've experienced and know we like, and other ones is just things that we've kind of picked up on life, that they're maybe connected to good memories, good times, good things that have happened to us, good experiences, and so we associate those tastes and smells with those experiences, and so they're more favourable to somebody else who hasn't, and that's all. What I think is well, that's what makes it all very interesting and nice, doesn't it, really? So this smells nice. Like I say, it's got some nice citrus there, a bit of pastry going on. So the next thing is to taste it. Now, to taste wine rather than just drink it, it's a little bit of a technique. It can be a bit embarrassing, but I say just don't probably do it in a restaurant. You know, it's sort of it's something that you kind of do when you're at home like this, or you just want to analyse the wine. So to drink the wine, you just pour it in the glass, pop it in your mouth, drink it. Job done. The world is right. To actually taste the wine, we're gonna pause and think about what it is. We've got to pop it in our mouth. Got to leave it there for a little while, and I can describe it's a bit like whistling backwards. So rather than blowing air out, you're going to be sucking air in and then whooshing the wine around your mouth, a bit like having a mouthwash, and then swallow. Okay. Also, I always say when you're doing tasting wine, don't put too much wine in your mouth at once, because what can also happen is that the alcohol that's in the wine can tickle the back of your throat and make you want to cough. And obviously, if you cough, if there's anybody sat opposite you, then they're not going to be too friendly with you afterwards. So it's just better that the alcohol stays in your mouth and doesn't go anywhere else. So I'm just going to show you, and then you guys can have a go yourself. So you pop it in. Oh, that's nice. Now, what is appealing about this, what is nice, one is, with all wines, they've all got a certain level of acidity. Depends on the grape variety and the climate they were grown in. The warmer a climate, the less acidity, they have more sugar, they tend to be riper, fuller wines. A cooler environment, they tend to have more acidity and less sugar, so you get sort of leaner wines with more freshness to them. This has got some nice freshness, that nice acidity. The acidity makes your mouth water. You got a nice, lovely mouth-watering zippiness in there. It cleanses your mouth as it's in. But also, what's in a wine and what you taste in the mouth is texture. You get this feel in there. Now, this wine has got lightness to it. It's got that freshness to it. It's got that citrus, zippy kind of a crisp edge to it. But there's also a little bit of weight in there. There's some ripeness. There's some like almost like oiliness that's in there from this ripe fruit, and it really comes through with like this sweet fruit. But it's not sweet. It's not that sweet fruit in itself. It's just the ripeness of it, and it just nicely balances. So you've got this weight in the body that's then this zippy freshness keeps it fresh and lively. And that's really, really nice. And then at the end of the palate, your palate's nice and clean. So this also works very well as an aperitif as well. Just have it on its own at the beginning. It levels out your palate. It kind of freshens it up. It's really good. Now, tasting that, I just thought that was a really pleasant fizz. Now, what we're doing, we're tasting it. Obviously, what I've done, you've used the two bits of apparatus that are really important. One is the nose, and the other part is the mouth. Now, the mouth, it kind of looks at the basic elements in food and wine. And this is the size that we're looking at, all to do with, I'd say, the basic kind of structures. So we're looking at things like sourness, bitterness, sweetness, saltiness, and there's another flavour called umami. This flavour, umami, is like a savoury element. If you think of things like soy sauce or cooked mushrooms, it refers to that. And the mouth is also performing the other side, which is that texture, that weight. Different liquids and different wines are no different, is that you're having that level on weight and how it feels in your mouth. Does it feel light? Does it feel heavy? Does it got some weight to it? Has it got an oiliness? Has it got stickiness? Or has it got this great fruity freshness that runs all the way through it? Now, the other bit of apparatus, like I said, is the nose. And what your nose is doing is picking up on all these wonderful aromas, but it also picks up on the flavours from your mouth. Now, the aromas, they all go up into your head. There's a thing called the olfactory bulb, and this olfactory bulb is connected to your memories and your emotions, and it's picked up the good, the bad, and the ugly throughout your life of all the things that you've tasted and smelt, and the things that you like and what you don't like, and the things that you're more drawn to and the things that you're not so keen on. So that's all going on through the nose. The nose will pick all these things up. Now, sometimes it can be a bit difficult to pick things out, because quite often, I think, when I was first into wine, you smell something, you think, well, it just smells of wine. What's going on about it? It just smells of wine. And, and if it does smell of wine, it smells a nice wine, and you want another glass of it, then I think that's brilliant. To often identify some fruits or flowers or something else that's going on in a wine, it can take a little bit of a practice. There is occasions where you just smell something, you think, well, it smells of apples, or it smells of raspberries or blackberries or something like that. But often these fruits and the other essences that might be in the wine are often subtle, or because your brain is not used to locating them in actually the location of wine, it kind of throws it a little bit. Because if I give you, like I say like any fruit, and I've explained this before with, say, like a strawberry or an apple, because your brain is familiar with a strawberry and apple, it can already anticipate what it's going to smell and taste like. But when you might get a strawberry or an apple or whatever it is in a wine, it might take your brain a little bit of time to register what that is, because it's out of context from where it usually finds those fruits. And it's the same with other things that you might get in there. But within wine tasting, what we find it important to do, there might, you can come out with what, you get wine critics or whatever, and people, wine writers say, come out with really sort of flowery descriptors. And these descriptors can sound kind of a bit of theatre, really, just make it sound, something quite nice and attractive. But they can be quite personal to that person. They don't mean anything to somebody else. So they're no good if you're trying to talk to somebody and say, well, this is what I'm experiencing in this glass, and that other person understanding what you're talking about and thinking, oh, I can see that when they take a sip of it. That's kind of what you wanted to get across. So we kind of keep to descriptors that people are more familiar with, and that would be descriptors that are common fruits, common flowers. You can get other things in wines, to do with the oak, so you might get some oaky notes. And there's another process called a malolactic fermentation that some wines go through, and this kind of can enable the wines to have a bit more of a buttery or creamy or a popcorny kind of taste and smell to them. And these are all things that you want to be able to just get across to people and people understand. So by doing this with the wine that we just had, so we can say now, we can conclude, our conclusion with this is, yes, I like this wine. Yes, I'll have another glass of it. So I say the appearance now is a nice golden colour. It is fresh with fresh citrus. It's got good acidity. It's got those apples, lemon curds on the side, a little bit of herb in there, and there's a touch on cooked pastries in there. So you get this like, sort of like a tart to it. And then what we're kind of saying is then when it finishes, it's got a nice clean edge to it. It's fresh. The bubbles kind of interact nicely with your mouth and they clean that palate. And then you're ready for either having another glass by itself or having some food with it. So that's kind of what you're doing with the wine itself, tasting the wine. Now, food and wine, again, it comes back to it's still a subjective experience because what you like might not be what somebody else likes. If somebody says this is a perfect match for this dish, it might be to that person, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be perfect to you, because there might be different things that you like. There might be something in the sauce you don't like. There might be something about the wine that you're not keen on. So all those things will have a reaction to whether you agree or not. So what wine, food and wine matching is, it's giving suggestions of things that tend to work quite well. Now, some of this is down to your own personal preferences. It's things that maybe go on in the wine. So say maybe something that's got lemon in the wine or an essence of that, and something that's got some sort of citrus in the food. They might just seem to work really well together. But there might be also the other constructs in the wine. And this could do with the sweetness, the sourness, the bitterness, the saltiness, etc., that some wines work together well. Particularly like with acidity, if you've got like a dish that's pretty high in acidity, you need a wine with acidity with it as well, because it can seem a bit like illogical to do that, because you think, well, if you've got an acidic wine and an acidic dish, surely you're just going to taste lots of acid, so it's going to be like a plate of vinegar. And it doesn't. The acids work well together to smooth out both the dish and the wine, and they're fantastic. Now, if you have an acidic dish and then you have a low acid wine, that wine will just taste flat and flabby. And it's the same with reds. Now, in red wine, there's just a difference of how they're made. Now, with a white wine, I'll just briefly go, white wine, you grow the grapes, you squeeze off the juice from the grape, and then with the juice, you ferment the juice and you make the wine. With a red wine, to get a red wine to actually get the colour, you need the actual skins. If you take off the skins of a red grape, it tends to be inside a white colour, so therefore you just make white juice, you'd have a white wine. So to get a red wine, you need to actually ferment it. So you pick the grapes, you ferment the grapes with the skin. So you kind of crush them up to get the juice going, to get the fermentation going, but you keep the grape skins in there as well, and that provides colour. But also what else is with that in the skins is a thing called tannin. And tannin is the bit that dries your mouth. It can sometimes make your gums stick to your teeth. And it can be an unpleasant experience if it's done in the wrong situation. And quite often it is done in the wrong situation. You might go around to somebody's house, the wine's already too warm, they give you a goldfish bowl of red wine that's meant to go with food, and it's very dry, and the experience of it is very dry, and it can put people off wanting to drink red wine, and they just stick to their white, so they can perfectly understand why. But the tannin in a red wine is part of its structure, and with food it can work really well. Now, with other protein dishes such as meats, pulses, cheeses, etc., that red wine and its tannins can work really well, because then they will soften out, and often a little bit of saltiness in that food will soften those tannins out no end, and you'll get this nice, wonderful, bigger, broader, silkier, smoother wine, and with the food it will so much more complement it, and it works really well than when it's by itself. Of course, not all red wines are massive and tannic. It depends on how long they've spent on the skins. It depends on the grape variety. Some grape varieties have got really thick skins with loads of tannin in it. Some have got really thinner skins, and they're light on the tannins. And there is quite a number of red wines you can serve chilled like a white wine. I wouldn't say it has chilled, but you could chill them, and they're really, really fabulous to have. And often we overlook those because we're too busy thinking that they have to be at room temperature. And when we say room temperature, it is around 18 degrees. Most of our homes are subtropic, and they're too warm. So with most red wines, it's not a bad idea to pop them in the fridge anyway for about 10-15 minutes, just to chill them down a little bit to get them to taste better. But you don't want them too chilled because the tannin in a red wine will accentuate as the colder it gets. It's just like, I suppose, having a cup of tea that you left a tea bag in, it stews and it's gone cold, you taste it. All you can taste is tannin. So that's what can happen if you really chill a tannic red wine down. So it's better to be a bit warmer in there. There is some white wines as well are made by fermentation on their skins, and they go into the banner of orange wines, and they have that tannin as well. So they're white wines with a bit of tannins, but we haven't got those here this evening. The great varieties in here are have been pressed off their skins. So going back onto the food and wine. So it's about looking at them basic constructs into the food and the wine. I always say that if you want to stick with whatever wine is your favourite wine and you want to stick with it throughout a meal, whatever meal you have, and that's what you enjoy, then do it. It's up to you. If that brings you enjoyment and pleasure and happiness in life, then just continue to do it. However, if you want to try different experiences as much as we want to try different dishes and what they taste like, and it's not just the taste and the smells, but it's also the textures, how they feel in our mouth, the food. It's the same with the wine, that you're putting these different wines and trying them to get those different experiences, so you're not having the same experience over and over again. So it is worthwhile exploring different wines with foods. Now some food and wine, it's good to say where it grows, that's where it goes. And it can be true that some wine regions, their foods and their wines have evolved together, so they tend to work together. So it's worth trying them in that aspect. But it's also just looking at, maybe I would look at it as sometimes I think, well, if this wine was a sauce, what do you think it would go with? You think, well, blackberries tend to go maybe with things like red meats, or maybe something like beef or something like that. You might think of cranberries with turkey, but you get some sort of red fruit wines in there. You might get some wines that are a little bit sort of woody, got a little bit baked apple and spice, and they kind of think, well, they might work with pork as like an apple sauce. So these things you can start to work out as you taste the wines and think about them as with a food. Again, heavy wine tends to go with a heavier dish. A lighter wine tends to go with a lighter dish. So these are things worth trying out. But I think the best thing is to keep drinking and keep eating and trying them out and go with that pleasure, because you'll find what you like and what you don't like. But with wine and dines, what we're doing today, is to enable to explore those aspects, to see what you like, to see what works. And from us, it's just through experience and drinking the wines and eating wonderful food, is to look at what we think works fairly well with certain wines, matched with certain dishes, and then obviously it's passing that on, that experience, to say, here, try this, see what you think, see how it goes. Now we think what we've arranged for you this evening are really good wines to go with these excellent dishes cooked by Colin's Fine Food. Now, just now to move on maybe to the actual wines and the dishes themselves, because we've touched on maybe quite a bit about the actual sparkling wine as it is, the Hunters. Now, just talk a bit about them. Hunters, that's the fun. They're a family-run producer based in New Zealand, and they make a range of wines. Obviously, New Zealand's famous for its Sauvignon Blanc. They make an excellent Sauvignon Blanc. And what I like about the Hunters is they always have this racy acidity, this freshness that goes through all the wines. And they do from sparkling to white to red as well. They do an excellent Pinot Noir that we have. They make some excellent Rieslings as well out there, some Pinot Gris to boot. Now, Jane Hunter, she got an OBE for services to wine. She is been known in the industry for a number of years. She consults to other winemakers and does an excellent job here with her own wines. Now, to make a sparkling wine, there is several routes to doing that. One route is you just get a white wine and you pump in CO2 gas. It's a bit like people who remember the 1970s used to think it's called soda streams. And we used to think it was like this miracle thing that you could just put these bits, you got a bit of a syrup, you added some water in it, you pumped in some gas and you got a fizzy pop. But hey, well, there's a similar process that can be done to some fizzy wine, but that's because you're cheap and cheerful. You're probably talking the stuff that you might find in some bargain supermarket for about £2-3 quid, and usually they've got tons of sugar in there as well. They've got very sweet. Now, so the other two methods is one, it's called the tank method, and this is where you've got a tank and it's like stainless steel. You make a wine as if you're just making a still wine. Generally, most sparkling wines are white, but you can obviously make pink and you can make red sparkling wines as well, but they're generally white. So you'll make this white wine still, but then you'll re-ferment it in the tank and it's under pressure. So what they do is under pressure, they'll keep that CO2 gas rather than escaping as part of the fermentation, because all fermentations, the release of gas is CO2. But with a sparkling wine, what you're doing is you're trapping it in there, and that keeps it in there, and then they bottle it under pressure. And Prosecco is a fizz that's made in this method. Now, other method is called the traditional method, and this is how we make champagne, English sparkling wine, and also this Miro Miro from New Zealand. And this is where you make a base wine, which is, again, you could do this in tank or you could do it in oak barrels, and you ferment and make a white wine. And it includes two of the grape varieties that you will also find in Champagne, which is Pinot Noir, which is a red grape, and Chardonnay. And like I said a moment ago about red wine and how red wine's made, that if you crush the juice out of a red grape gently, you will get white wine. And this is what they've done here. They've crushed the Pinot Noir very gently, because Pinot Noir is a red grape variety, very gently, to get white juice out of it. But also what you might get is you might get a teeny bit of colour, but you'll also get some of that red fruit flavours from it as well that can be added in. And what it does is it can be very subtle, and it can add a little bit more body in there as well into the wine. So basically, this is a wine made in the same method as Champagne, with the same grape varieties that are used in Champagne, but over in New Zealand. Now, I said the first bit, you make the base wine. You're making that from these two grape varieties, and the two grape varieties from the base wine is your Pinot Noir and your Chardonnay. So you've picked them, you've squeezed them, you've got the juice. You've then fermented them separately, and then you blend them together. Once they're blended together, you then put the wine into the bottle. It goes in here, and then part of the fermentation process to ferment any wine is you have to use yeast, and the yeast eat up the sugars, and these then convert the sugar into alcohol. And generally, as they're eating it up, they're releasing the CO2 gas that goes into the atmosphere. With this, now it's gone into the bottle again. They put some more yeast in and a little bit of a sugar solution, and then they pop a top on it, and they let it re-ferment in the bottle. And as it's fermenting in the bottle, it's releasing all these aromas and flavours as well as the bubbles. And this yeast is trapped in there, so all the yeast is going in, it starts to convert into alcohol, all the sugars, but it's still there, the yeast is in there, and it starts to fall into the bottle. And what they do is in the same as in Champagne, is they leave it on this yeast, and the yeast is called the lees because it's got other bits, it's got those tiny grape particles and whatnot in there as well. And they start to rest in the bottle. And as they rest in the bottle, the lees, they impart other flavours into the wine. And the longer you leave this lees in the bottle, then you impart more flavours, and it takes, I've usually sort of 12 to 15 months for these flavours to start to be apparent in the wine, and it's called autolysis. That's the process that's been used, And this lipolysis that happened imparts flavours like a yeasty, biscuity, brioche cooked pastries. And this is what's very common in champagne and sparkling wines that are done in a similar method to champagne itself. And the longer, like I say, the longer you leave them, the more that you can get these yeasty flavours and aromas that will come into the wine. Now, at some point, you need to get rid of this yeast deposit, because otherwise it will be in there, it'll end up in your glass, and then it probably won't be very pleasant to drink. So what they have to do is, it's called disgorgement, and they get the bottle, and they gradually, what's called a process of wriggling, and this is where you gradually turn the bottle, so many turns over a period of time, and you gradually start to get the bottle from being upright till it goes up, till it turns upside down, and then all the deposit ends up in the neck of the bottle. And then to get this out, they then freeze the neck of the bottle. The top comes off, which is actually a crown top. It's like a beer top that comes out, and as it pops out, the sediment comes out in a lump of ice, and it gets rid of it all. And then what they do is then they top up the fizz, and that can be with either a sugar solution to add just a little bit of balance to sugar and the acidity out, or it could just be a little bit more of the wine in there. And then that's when you get your famous mushroom cork popped in and the wire cage tied on in there as well. So that's basically how you make this sort of fizz. And part of the fizz as well, we could also look at, which I won't go into too much detail here, but it was fizz. The French go on about a guy called Dom Perignon being your man for inventing champagne. That wasn't necessarily true. Dom Perignon did work in champagne. He did help to create champagne as we know today, but he certainly didn't invent it. His job at first was to get rid of the fizz, because the fizz used to be seen as a fault to the wine, that something had gone wrong to it, because ages back in Champagne, all the wines there were sold as still wines, and when some of the wines started to fizz, it was seen as a fault. It was over in England that some guys over here, Christopher Merritt, looked into why the wines were starting to fizz, and he realised they were re-fermenting in the bottle. And it was a guy from Newcastle, and this was a Robert Mansell, who developed glass to withstand pressure of holding the fizz in, because the problem was when the bottles were fizzing inside and re-fermented, the pressure was making the bottles explode. So it was Robert Mansell of Newcastle who enabled us to have reinforced glass to stop them exploding. And then there's a gentleman under the name of Digby who actually then went on to make the shape and form of the bottles that we know today. And so it was really over to England who got champagne and sparkling wine up to a start as we know today. So it's quite nice now that we've got our own English sparkling and Welsh wine industry going on, that's now sort of come full circle. But here we've got this lovely one from New Zealand, and the family, like I say, it's the Hunter family. And what they've done here as well is for me, what they're trying to achieve is keeping that freshness, that cleansely, it's like cleansing your palate as each mouthful goes in. You get this lovely citrus burst, then you get this ball of ripe fruit, and then towards the end it just cleans it all away again with this lovely acidity. And this is why it works with the dish that you're having, because the dish here is kind of this kind of rich, creamy cheese sort of side to it. Now, there's lots of like fattiness, there's richness in there, it's mouth coating, it sticks, it's lovely, it's got a lovely texture to it. And then you have a mouthful of the Hunters, and the Hunters then clean and wash all that away, but they also enhance that citrus side. They come in with like hints of lemon, there's a little bit of herb that runs through that. And because this has had the yeast lipolysis, so you've got that slight cooked pastry, biscuity side, that nutty element to it, that will work wonderful with the umami of Parmesan, because Parmesan is kind of that umami sort of taste, that savoury side. And that will work lovely with these yeast lipolysis notes that you're getting in the sparkling wine as well. And then it's all just cleaned away, it's all fresh. Then you're ready for your next mouthful, have another drink, cleans away, have another mouthful. And then it's just bliss, this balance of this light freshness with this lovely richness and oily, you know, sort of, not oiliness, I suppose, like this sort of ripe, mouth-coating cheese, and then this washes it away, and you come back in, and that's just a wonderful experience. So that's kind of what we're having here. So enjoy. Right, so next along, we're going to try a red. And the red wine is the Crozes Hermitage. And Crozes Hermitage is from France. And this is a place in the Rhone Valley. The predominant grape in here is Syrah. And also known, if you're Australian, as Shiraz. But it's the same grape variety. Now, I'm just going to pour out a tasting measure. And we're just going to talk a little bit about the wine itself. Now, the Rhone is famous for its Syrah wines. You've got the Northern Rhone and you've got the Southern Rhone. The Northern Rhone tends to be, that is Syrah, that's the red grape. There's one or two white grapes. In the Southern Rhone, it's a blend of grape varieties. It tends to be predominated by Grenache, and you'll get other grape varieties from Mourvedre, as well as Syrah, and then there's an abundance of other grape varieties that go there as well. And one of the famous, I suppose, red wines from the Southern Rhone is Chateauneuf du Pape, which works fantastically with Christmas dinner, by the way. So here we've got, this is all more about the fruits than it is anything else. It's 100% Syrah. And firstly, so we're looking at it, and it's got this lovely, bright, ruby colour. And with wine, we keep, like I say, just before we go any further on the colour, just to explain that, so we're looking at pouring a tasting measure, but if you're pouring a glass of wine, I would say pour it no more than the curve on the glass. One, it looks nice, and two, it allows you to aerate the wine, get some oxygen to it without it spilling everywhere, and that's better than it pouring everywhere. Nothing wrong if you want to fill your glass right up top and you enjoy doing that, then you do it. But just if you want to be able to appreciate some more of the aromas, allow them not to be locked in, to be released, then have it just on the bowl, on the curve on the bowl here. And another thing you can do is also just hold it by the stem, because the stem, one, it stops you from warming the wine up unnecessarily. Sometimes you might need to warm a wine up a little bit, so you just cup it underneath. But it just looks nice. It looks nice for us. It stops all lots of fingerprints getting all over your glass and it not looking as bright and as attractive as you want it to be. So you just tend to hold it by the stem. But there's no law that you have to do that. So, okay, if you just want to grip it down there and you want to drink it, then that's fine. Don't worry about it. So it's a nice bright ruby. It's got some deep colour to it because I look down it and I can't see the stem of the glass. So, and this is kind of the grape variety, which is Syrah or Shiraz. And then we're going to give it a swirl. And saying, looking at it, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing floating in it. There's nothing cloudy about it. And swirl it and sniff it. And yes, it just smells all about the fruit. This is ripe. It's concentrated. It's rich. It's got there's a little bit of earthy meatiness about it, which you do often find in Syrah. And what I can describe, it's like a pubbit of blackberries, and then you've squashed them and you've got them all down. So you've got that fresh blackberry smell, but you've also maybe taken a portion of those blackberries away and started to just gently cook them, and then releasing some of that sweet sugar essence about them as well. And it's just lovely. It's just like, oh, I just smell that, I think, wow, and there's this maybe something like that, a little bit confected in there, like sort of a light spicy, even like a baking spicy kind of aroma to it coming out. Now, to taste it. Even though there's lots of big on fruits there, it still is in the mouth. It's a big mouthful of lovely, juicy fruit, but it's got a lightness to it. It's got a freshness to it. You've got that zippy acidity that runs through there. And again, it's the acidity that you would find in picking a fresh blackberry off the bush. And you get that lovely acidity that sort of balances nicely with the ripe sugars in the berry. And this is what you get in here. And there's a tannin, and again, that tannin is what causes that dryness. And if you have it in the wrong moment as a wrong wine, it's the tannin that makes your mouth and gums stick. But here, in this instance, it's there. There's some dryness. I can feel it runs across my tongue. I can feel that dry. But there's enough fresh acidity that just cleans that away. But this tannin with the food will work really, really well. Now, with something like the meat or even I would say the mushrooms in the Wellington will work with this, because you get this fresh acidity that goes in there and it really lifts things up. It kind of cleans away through all that lovely, again, a bit like what I was doing with the previous dish and wine, that you've got this fatty essence, and the acidity cuts through that, so it kind of cleanses it, it enhances it, it cleans it, and it makes it, it just complements it together. And with like things like the fruits, they often go in a sort of a harmony with cooked red meats. And again, you'll find this with stuff like lentils and mushrooms and things like nutty walnuts and things like that. Often they just work together in harmony. You get the fruit coming through and it enhances the savouriness to the actual meats or the vegetables. And it just seems to work really, really well. Then you got the cleanness that comes through, it lifts it up. The food itself what you don't want the food to be doing is dulling your wine. You don't want to make it where you can't taste anything in the wine, or it doesn't make it nice. And this is like the kind of thing you want. Something often with meat, you need something that's got some juicy red fruits or dark fruits to it that just work a treat with your dish. And I would say that this will definitely do, because I just think this is a gorgeous wine. I'm just going to take another sniff and a taste. I mean, by itself, I'm okay with that level of tannin. Some people might say, no, that's not for me, that I'm just drinking it by itself. But I just think it's nice. There's a little, this is all about fruit. It's supposed to be done. This has been done in what's called concrete. The concrete eggs are old fashioned with. So it's a round fermentation tank made of concrete. And what the point is of it being round, it's all about getting circulation going in the fermentation, to keep the wine moving around, to keep it moving around on the skins, so it imparts more of the flavours and the colours that you want, and also the right amount of tannins. And then it's been aged in stainless steel. Now, generally with Syrah, it's aged in oak. It's given a bit of oak, and the oak part's a bit of flavour, but this has been put in stainless steel. So what they wanted is to get that really fruity essence. There's that maybe the sort of the spicy bit I get, and the light dusting of that spice is maybe more to do with the floral side that you often get from Syrah. Syrah is, I would say, if you're going to describe it characteristically, I probably got another line of, well, blackberries. It sometimes has like bacon fat or smoky bacon going on in there. This not so much, but I can do taste there's a savoury edge to it, and particularly now that the wine has been swallowed. And afterwards, which is called the finish, when the wine's gone, what you can taste, I just get a little bit of savoury essence to it. And this is often this sort of quality that you get in Syrah. And I just think this is a real good foodie wine, because the acidity in here is that the freshness will make whatever you're eating, it will just bring in this added depth to it, but also this lifted it up with the fruits and this lovely acidity. But the acidity in the wine will become smoother, become rounder. The wine itself will become rounder, and it just becomes a really enjoyable experience. It's again, it's that interaction of both working together and doing their job. So that is lovely, and I've been great, you know, with these tastings as well. It's always good to get people's opinions back, whatever your comments are, what you've experienced when you've tasted it. Let us know. It'd be good to hear people's experience of what they felt, how it worked with the food, or if something didn't work with the food for you. You know, what was it that didn't work? Because that's important to know for you as a person, because then these are things that you can look out for with food and wines, that you can think, well, would that work for me or not, going on past experience, and what will I enjoy or not. But certainly always good to get experiences. Any ones that are particularly interesting, we might then put them on our website, or we could put them on with that wine to say this wine is great with this dish, and this person, we can maybe, you know, put your comment on to say this is what works from a customer. So that's the red for the main dish. And then finally, we're going to have what's called the dessert wine with the last dish. Now, again, going back to food and wine, like I said earlier, if you just want to have the same glass of wine all the way through your meal, that's fine, that's up to you. But like I said earlier, there's certain things in a wine, maybe the constructs of the wine or the constructs of the food, and it's often the food, and it's often not the food's main agenda. It's not often the meat or the main veg or whatever it is, it's generally to do with either condiments and the sauces that you choose to add, or the herbs and spices you put in there can vastly affect how a wine tastes. So they're the things you're kind of looking at. Now, we've touched on how tannin and food interact together, and also with the acidity. That's there's a similar thing that, we said that acidic dishes generally work with more acidic wines, and with sweet foods, generally sweet wines work better, because if you try something with a lot of high portion of sugar in the dish, and you have a wine that's got that acidity, the acidity in the wine will jar with that sugar. It just will. Now, some people might not be bothered. They might think, well, I don't care. It's what I want. That's fine. If that's what. But I just think generally it's to pick. If you've got a sweet dish, you'll need something that's a wine that's sweet or sweeter than the dish that you're having, and they just work well together. Now, people often think of sweet wine as something cheap and cheerful, and it's not. There is cheap and cheerful wines that are sweet. And maybe those who were brought up drinking wine in the 1970s from Germany, Fieber Milk and Blue Nun, etc., may have got these memories still locked in their head. That's what it's about, but it's not. Wine used to be, on the whole, many years ago, sweets, because sweetness was a prized thing to have. So if you could make a wine with sweetness in it, that was a fabulous. I mean, champagnes used to be very sweet at one bit, and it's only because our tastes have changed, and also because of health reasons, people have gone more towards the drier styles. And this can then be a bit of a letdown for people, then thinking, well, I don't want dessert wines, I don't want their sugar, they're bad for you, blah, blah, blah. But it's like anything, a wine is, it's all about moderation, isn't it? A wine is got a big dollop of alcohol in there that, you have too much of it, it's not going to be good for you. In moderation, it's okay. And it's the same with a sweet wine. With sweet wine, it's going to have a big dollop of sugar. It depends on the wine you're having. But in moderation, it should be okay. Now, the wine we've got here is from Chile, and it's made from two grape varieties, which is Semillon and Gewürztraminer. Both are used in sweet wines, but they also can make wonderful still wines, and both in themselves have got their own characteristics of why they're in this wine. Now, this one, to make a sweet wine, you could, I suppose, just get a dry wine and chuck a load of sugar in, but it wouldn't be very nice. There is a way where you allow the grapes to raisin, and then you use raisin grapes and you ferment those because they're concentrated in sugars. There is a way where you can freeze the grapes. This is called Heist wine, and you then crush the grapes, and it removes all the water out of the grapes in ice particles, and you're left with a very concentrated must, which you can make very sweet wines from. You can also pick the grapes where they've got this particular kind of rot. Most rot on grapes is bad, but there's a particular kind called noble rot or botrytis, and that's when they're picked, and they're picked individually, or you squeeze the grapes there, you get really highly concentrated sweet wines. This one we've got here is called late harvest, and late harvest is another way to make sweet wine. And this is a way where you just leave, as the name suggests, you leave the grapes as long as you can on the vine to gain more and more sugar. So as a grape develops, it gathers and gathers more sugar. One thing you've got to be careful of is, as it gathers more sugar, that the acidity can start to drop. So you tend to pick grape varieties that have a decent amount of acidity. Gewürztraminer, not so great when it comes to acidity, but Semillon has got plenty of it if it's grown right. So that kind of gives you this nice freshness with it. So you don't want to lose too much of it, because otherwise you could end up with a really sweet wine that is quite flat and flabby. So the acidity of the sweet wine helps because it lifts it up and gives it a nice fresh appeal. It's a bit like we were saying with like the fizz and the cheese pudding, is you've got this richness of all that cheese and that creamy sauce, and then you've got something like this fizz here that then comes through and cleans your palate. Well, it's a bit similar, I suppose, with the dessert wine, is that you've got this lovely balance of all this richness and sugars, but then the acidity cleans through, keeps your palate nice and fresh. It doesn't just end up with just this sticky, treacly, syrupy mess in your mouth. Now, Both these grape varieties, the Gewurz is more known for, well, as it sounds, it sounds Germanic. It tends to be grown quite around in sorts of places in Germany and in Alsace, in France. It just means spicy grape. It tends to have a lot of flavours of, I think of like orange peel, rose petal, Turkish delight. It's a wonderful grape variety, and it makes a wonderful still wine of its own as well. It can be, I personally find, I like to have a nice cool glass of it rather than let me just sit and enjoy half a bottle or so of it. I find it's better that way, but it's excellent to go with food, especially spicy Asian foods. Semillon is a great variety that in France, it's often found in Bordeaux, and in Bordeaux it makes Bordeaux's top class sweet dessert wines out there, and some of those are very expensive indeed. It's often blended with another great variety called Sauvignon Blanc, which again we know from New Zealand, makes really zippy, fresh still wines, but you can also make fabulous dessert wines with it as well. And it's also famous in New South Wales in Australia, where it's grown and produced by itself, and it makes these wonderful wines that can age quite a number of years, and they take on different characteristics as they age. But here, this is from Chile. It's from Casa Silva. This is a family that's been producing, growing grapes from 1700s, but I think it was the 1990s that they decided to start not selling their grapes to other wine producers who made wines under their own names, that they'd make their own wine from it, and that's what they've done them, and they make some excellent wines. We stock a decent range of their wines, including this one here, and I'm all for bigging up dessert wines, because I just think they have literally been put on the shelves and left there, and they shouldn't be. It's a bit like your sherries and your ports, where people just maybe drag out a glass at Christmas, and you shouldn't do. You should try more, and we could do some tastings on those in the future. But for now, we've got this wonderful late harvest Gewurz Semillon here in Casa Silva, and what they've done is they've got the grapes in Chile. So Chile is, you're talking South America. It's on the west coast of South America. It's a thin country. It's got very varied climates in there. You've got the top, you've got the Atacama Desert. It's hot down below. You've got penguins. You've got the Andes Mountains running up on the inside, and on the outside there's some mountains that run along the coast. But you've got a very, very cold Pacific Ocean, and this has a current that comes up from the Antarctic, and it brings in some really cool currents. And this works really perfectly with the environment, because the climate is Mediterranean, so it's hot, and then it draws in all this cool air. This cool air allows the right environment for grapes to grow and to ripen and get really, really nice. Get lots and lots of ripe fruit tastes in there, but also maintain that acidity, so the acidity doesn't drop either. And where they've planted the vineyards here are not too far away from this coast, so they're getting all this nice, lovely coastal breeze and fogs that's cooling down the environment. So as you can see here, the wine, it's got a deeper golden colour. I've served it in a smaller glass because, again, it's because I just think if you do love these sweet wines, there's nothing wrong with having a big glass. I'm not gonna poo-poo that, but for me, I'd probably serve it in just a smaller glass. It's because you can either see it being looking, it's got that weight to it just by looking at it, by rolling it around. It seems to have a little bit of weight to it, and then I'm sticking my nose in, and then immediately I'm greeted with just this burst of aromas. And what I'm getting in there is I'm getting sort of tropical fruits. There's pineapple coming in there. There's melon. There is a bit of rose, and again there is this herbal tang. Getting a little bit of like there's like some maybe tarragon or something in the background. A bit of tobacco, and the tobacco generally goes with botrytis. So I'm just wondering if some of the grapes, even though they're late harvest, I've begun to get some of the botrytis fungus on them, which is then gives them a sort of a unique flavour characteristic, which often has a little bit of tobacco with it. There's orange peel going on in there, but there's also this real freshness coming through. It's like, you know, it doesn't just smell sugary or syrupy. It's got this nice, this fresh acidity. Like if you got a melon or just a freshly cut pineapple, and then brought it close to your nose, and you can almost smell that sort of fresh acidity coming through as well. This is what we've got here. So having a taste. That's nice. That's really nice. Wow, hang on, one more. Yes. And every time I do this, I say I should be drinking more dessert wines because these are fabulous. And what's really good about late harvest wines is they have that, they don't get, they've accumulated an amount of sugars, but not a massive amount of sugar. So they've got the sweetness there. There's this nice oiliness, slight stickiness to it, but there's this so fresh acidity that just runs through and cleans it. And it's a bit like, I suppose, what's the theme of being of all these wines for the dishes today is that they've all had something that's contributed to the body, to the essence, to the flavors, to the aromas, but they've also had this powerful acidity that's gone through and just cleansed and cleans it. It uplifts the food, it can uplift flavors, but it also cleanses your palate. So I'm not left with stickiness in there, but what I'm tasting is these wonderful tropical fruits, but they're not overpowering. There's some nice, that almost the herbal side to it just gives it a little bit of dried textured feel in my mouth. And that's really, really nice. Now this is to go with the passion fruit parfait. So they work together. It's good. It accentuates the passion fruit. It lifts it up. It gives it a little bit more. It adds some citrus appeal to it. You're getting all those sorts of nice fruits that just, it amplifies it. It turns up the tone on all these fruits, and then it'll clean through it. Brings freshness. Then you're just ready for more. So you just drink the wine, have some more, drink, and wonderful. Just keep going. Just keep going. Have seconds. Have another glass, and that's just the beauty of what it's doing. Both are working together. They're working in harmony. They're both helping each other out. Again, something like this, you could easily just have it by itself as well and have it as a pudding. But I think when you have it with a pudding, you suddenly have this like, wow, why haven't I been doing this before? And the other thing about wines that have got a higher sugar content in sweeter wines, they work well with salt. So if you think of things like salty cheeses, particularly, like Stilton kind of cheeses, they're just perfect. And once you have them, you try them, you do question yourself, why haven't I done this before? And I need to now be doing this far more regularly. You might end up being a bit stinky from all the cheese, but who cares? Because it's just such a wonderful experience to do. And I would say, if you've got any left at the end, do try it as well, just to see what I'm saying. Because if anybody has had, say, something like rock salt and caramel and chocolate, or that sort of thing, and see now the saltiness and the sugar and sometimes a little bit of that bitterness, they just gel together, and you just think, wow, this is wonderful. And that's what you often do with a dessert wine. It works well with the sugar, but it can also work with the saltiness in foods as well, such as cheeses. And so please look at them. So that's a little bit on food and wine. Hopefully you've enjoyed the dishes as well from Colin's Fine Food. I just think they're wonderful. We've had, like I say, we've had the double baked cheese pudding. We've had the fillet of beef or the mushroom and lentil Wellington, and we've just finished it on a passion fruit parfait with these lovely wines that we've selected from ourselves at Guest Wines. If you've enjoyed today, please get in touch, leave a comment, that'd be great. If you want to stay and know more about wine, then please sign up to our newsletter. That's at www.guestwines.com. Just you can sign up there and we'll keep you in touch with all that's going on in wine. We do have regular offers, and we do have other tastings and Zoom tastings, plus our wine and dines with Colin's Fine Foods that will continue throughout the year. So could I just say thank you very much for your time. It's been lovely to be here and taste these wonderful wines. Enjoy the rest of your evening or afternoon, or whenever it is you're having your dishes. Finish the food, have some more wine, and just stay in touch with us. And thank you for watching. Cheers.